In the heart of a forgotten park, veiled by the embrace of ancient oaks and whispered legends, stood a statue unlike any other. This was the statue of Seraphina, a figure carved with such precision and sorrow that one could almost hear the silent cries of a tormented soul trapped within its cold, marble confines. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, for it was said that at the stroke of midnight, the statue wept tears of blood, painting its pallid cheeks with the scarlet hue of unseen anguish. The origins of the statue were as mysterious as the phenomenon it was known for. Some said it was the work of a heartbroken sculptor who poured his grief into the stone after losing his beloved. Others whispered of darker rites, of a pact sealed with entities veiled from human understanding, granting the sculpture an eerie semblance of life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced like specters among the trees, the air around the park grew unnaturally still. The chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves fell silent, as if nature itself held its breath in anticipation of the nightly sorrow to unfold. On a particularly moonless night, a group of thrill-seekers, fueled by curiosity and the heady thrill of potential discovery, ventured into the park. Their laughter and jests echoed hollowly in the oppressive silence, a stark contrast to the somber watchfulness of the oaks. As they approached the statue, a chill wind arose, whispering secrets long forgotten and warnings unheeded. The statue stood in a small clearing, bathed in an ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from within the marble itself. Seraphina's face, a masterpiece of sorrow, gazed eternally at a point unseen, her eyes deep wells of despair. As the clock tower in the distance began its midnight chime, a profound hush enveloped the group, suffocating their bravado. With the final toll of the bell, a shiver ran through the air, and the statue's eyes, previously dry and lifeless, began to glisten. Tears, thick and crimson, welled up, spilling over and trailing down her cheeks in silent testimony to an eternal grief. The sight was unnerving, a visceral confrontation with something wholly unnatural. The group stood frozen, caught between disbelief and dawning horror. The blood seemed to glow in the darkness, casting an otherworldly light that painted everything in a macabre hue. The ground around the statue's base was stained dark, the earth seemingly swallowing the sorrow that fell upon it. As the night deepened, the air grew colder, and the whispers of the wind became more insistent, carrying with them the faintest echoes of a woman's lament. It was as if the very atmosphere was imbued with the statue's sorrow, enveloping all in a mantle of despair. One by one, the group began to feel an overwhelming sadness, a heartache so profound it was as if it welled up from the depths of their own souls. It was a shared anguish, unexplainable yet as real as the chilling air they breathed. The statue's grief was infectious, a curse that leached into their hearts, binding them to the sorrow of Seraphina. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the darkness, the statue's tears slowly ceased, the blood drying to a dull, rusty color on the marble. The group, drained and shaken, stumbled away from the clearing, their laughter and bravado shattered by the night's ordeal. They spoke little of what had transpired, each wrestling with the lingering weight of sorrow that clung to them like a second skin. The crying statue remained, a sentinel of sorrow in the heart of the forgotten park. Its mystery endured, a testament to the unknown and the unseen forces that thread through the fabric of our world. And as the days turned to nights and back again, the legend of the statue's nightly vigil grew, a whisper in the wind of something ancient, something sorrowful, something eternally bound to the cycle of night and tears. As the story of the crying statue spread beyond the confines of the local town, it began to attract not just the thrill-seekers and the curious, but those who sought to understand, to unravel the enigma wrapped in marble and tears. Among them was Eleanor, a young woman with a keen interest in the paranormal and the unexplained. She was drawn to the statue not by the thrill of the supernatural, but by a deep, empathetic need to comprehend the source of its sorrow, to offer solace if she could. Eleanor arrived as autumn's breath painted the park in hues of gold and amber. She approached her investigation with a methodical mind, armed with a tape recorder, a notebook filled with research on local lore, and a heart open to the experiences of those who had witnessed the statue's midnight lament. Her first night by the statue was much like the tales she had heard. At midnight, the air grew thick with an inexplicable melancholy, and the statue wept its bloody tears. Eleanor felt the wave of sorrow wash over her, a tide of grief so potent it threatened to drag her down into its depths. Yet, she stood firm, her resolve anchored by a need to understand, to help. Over the following days, Eleanor delved into the history of the park and the statue. She learned of the sculptor, a man named Jonathan Harker, whose love for a woman named Seraphina was the talk of the town in its bygone days. Seraphina, however, was lost to a mysterious illness that swept through the area, leaving Jonathan inconsolable. In his grief, he poured his soul into creating the statue, a memorial to the love and sorrow that consumed him. But there was more to the story, whispered hints of ancient rituals and bargains struck in shadowed groves. It was said that Jonathan sought the aid of a local wise woman, one versed in the old ways and the language of spirits. Desperate to preserve a part of Seraphina, to keep her memory alive, he was led down a path that blurred the boundaries between life and death, love and obsession. Eleanor's research led her to the descendants of those who had known Jonathan and Seraphina, gathering tales that painted a picture of a man driven to the brink by loss and a desire to transcend the mortal coil. She explored the forgotten corners of the park, uncovering symbols carved into ancient stones, hidden away from casual glances, their meanings obscured by time yet suggestive of rituals meant to bind spirit to stone. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, Eleanor realized that the statue's sorrow was not just a reflection of Jonathan's grief but a manifestation of Seraphina's unfulfilled desires and dreams, her love for Jonathan, and her silent plea for release from the marble prison. Determined to break the cycle, Eleanor sought the expertise of those learned in ancient lore and the breaking of curses. Under the light of a full moon, they gathered around the statue, armed with knowledge gleaned from dusty tomes and whispered secrets passed down through generations. The ritual was complex, a weaving of words and symbols, of offerings made and permissions sought from the unseen. As they worked, the air around the statue shimmered with an ethereal light, and the ground trembled with the weight of unspoken words longing for release. As the final incantation was spoken, a profound silence enveloped the park. The statue's tears flowed one last time, not blood, but clear and shimmering like the first dew of morning. The sorrow in the air lifted like a fog at sunrise, replaced by a sense of peace and completion. When dawn broke, the statue of Seraphina stood unchanged in the eyes of the world, yet those who knew, those who had felt the weight of her sorrow, sensed the difference. The park was no longer a place of whispered fears and midnight vigils but a sanctuary where the memory of a love lost to time was honored. Eleanor left the town with a heart lighter than when she had arrived, her soul enriched by the experience and the knowledge that sometimes, the most profound mysteries are rooted in the most human of emotions, love, loss, and the desire for closure. The legend of the crying statue lived on, not as a tale of terror, but as a reminder of the power of love to transcend the boundaries of life and death, and of the compassion of strangers who, driven by an innate need to understand and to heal, can break the chains of ancient sorrow.